You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Jake Keller.
Hey, how are you doing?
Jake, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and if you want, what you do professionally?
Yeah, for sure. So I live in the Bay Area, in Oakland, California. I've lived here since January 2016. I'm originally from Denver, Colorado. I grew up there, spent all my time, like playing in the mountains and hiking and fishing and all that fun stuff in the Rocky Mountains, snowboarding in the winter. And then I went to University of Colorado at Boulder, studied biology, ecology and evolutionary biology, and studied cannabis while I was there. Got really into growing plants and horticulture, and somehow like got bit by the mycology bug, and followed that. And now I work for a startup that is using fungal proteins to feed dogs and cats.
Well, so what exactly, I think when you hear the word, you said mycology, right?
Yeah,
So mycology, that's the plant studies, right? But that's more of like mushrooms.
yeah. So yeah, exactly. It's where botany is studying plants, mycology is studying mushrooms and fungus.
Okay, now I've come across so many trees that have like this white foam coming out of it. And then I've also come across walking by a stop sign or some random trail and seen a really funky mushroom, and I always wondered what happened if I ate it. So, can you explain a little bit about the study of just mushrooms in general? Because I think people either think of the psychedelic ones or they think of a fungus.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So like mushrooms are just totally misunderstood, I think, in definitely in our culture, American culture. I know I grew up like pointing at mushrooms and people being like, "Oh, don't be interested in that. That could kill you or that could hurt you." And just like that sentiment like stuck with me. And I think that's part of the reason that it caught me so, or the hobby like caught me so strong, is just because like there's this stigma against it. But yeah, in general, it's like fungus is takes many forms. It can be like yeast found in beer and bread, which we love, or cheese, that kind of thing. Salami, of course, uses like so many of these foods use different fungal enzymes or proteins or something to like make them so rich and like something that we love.
Well, people think fungus is bad. They're like, "Oh my God, my food's got mold or fungus on it." I'm like, you understand that we use mold and we use funguses to help cure things as well?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, mycology, you're right, is like the breadth of it is like insane. Like it goes from medicine to food to textiles to fuels and like enzymes and just like all these components that can come from fungus. Of course, like the largest organism in the world is also a fungus too. Is what they think now. Fungal mat in Oregon, I think.
Well, even with understanding more about it, like are you able to spot like on a trail or a nature walk a certain type of mushroom or depiction of one? I think what really makes it interesting is a lot of people like the look of it. A lot of people look at them and they're like, "Whoa, that thing's so trippy. That's so like out of there. It's so crazy looking." But I'm like, it does bring in a point. I don't know how many times I went on a nature walk and some person was like, "Don't eat the mushroom. They're poisonous. They're deadly. Don't eat that berry." I'm like, "Look, I'm not gonna lie to you. I ate that thing 5 minutes ago and I feel perfectly fine."
Well, yeah, I definitely don't advocate like just like picking and eating anything, because there definitely are like deadly mushrooms out there, especially in North America. You'd have to be like very particular to like the location that you're in. Um, but yeah, most places you can pick up a field guide or find a mycology group or club pretty easily, and take a hike with them, and they'll show you like all the good stuff for real, like all the bolets, like these choice edible mushrooms that, like, if you're lucky to find them in the grocery store up to like $60 to $100 a pound, you can find them like relatively easily if you know what you're looking for. And most of them don't have that many lookalikes that would kill you or hurt you, in any like serious way. Um, maybe you might make a mistake and like eat something that just doesn't agree with you. You know, not everybody's body agrees with every mushroom too, but for the most part, it's like pretty safe. As long as you're not, you know what not to eat for sure. That's where to start.
Do you go on walks and try and find mushrooms, like try and look for them and see which ones you can kind of discover about them?
Oh yeah, everything. I really love like everything in mycology. So I've done everything from like looking for proteins to um growing them, cultivating them. I just started like a vermicomposting experiment with mycelium. So it's like using mycelium and worms. But yeah, I love taking nature walks too and finding them out in nature. It's like really inspiring to see how they grow in nature and then try to like see if that can't be a business idea or helpful to humanity in some like more intimate way than just like seeing it on a nature walk.
Well, even with mushrooms helping humanity, like how would you explain them helping humanity? A lot of people, like I could bring up the point that they're used to cure things, but a lot of people look at mushrooms and they're mostly warned about in media or news that they're deadly, they're poisonous. They're kind of shown to us as kids, like, don't, be careful of that. That can cause this, that can cause that. It's like, but no one ever looks at the benefits towards them.
Oh yeah, yeah, they're definitely underappreciated. Like I already said before.
Well,
um
relate them to a fucking dick. Like whenever someone looks down at their dick or something, it's like, oh, it's a mushroom tip. It's like, all right, come on, man.
oh yeah, that's so true. It's like just the butt of jokes, for sure. But it's really important, like soil building starts with fungus. I feel, fungus and bacteria. So we really owe, most of everything that we grow to these organisms. So they definitely hold like a very important space in ecology. But you're right, it's just like so easy to make fun of them too, and they look so weird. And like there's of course like the rumors and the myths. Like there's this mushroom myth in Hawaii that there's this stinkhorn that like women smell it and have an orgasm like immediately. And I mean
Wait,
that's
wait, wait.
cool.
You got to explain that one again. Say what?
Yeah, so I guess that's the myth, right? There's supposed to be this Hawaiian mushroom that is some relative of a stinkhorn, which to me smell absolutely disgusting. If I'm being honest, like I think the mycologist word for it is farinaceous, or like smelling of starch. To me, it smells like semen, like basically, if you want to say that. So, um, but yeah, apparently the rumor is like women smell it and have an orgasm, but it's hasn't. This isn't tested. These are rumors and myths. Um, but if it gets people out in the woods, like looking for interesting things, like that's cool. So
I think the really spotlight needs to be focused on how important mycology is, first of all, to a lot of our global issues. I mean, they're good for improving like resource efficiency, such as like making renewable like uses for products like fossil fuel, upgrading waste streams to valuable food and feed ingredients. I mean, it counteracts so many lifestyle diseases, antibiotic resistance. It's a lot of what kind of people really don't pay attention to is how closely a lot of things can get spread. Like if we look at news media, we look at anything, when you see like gun violence, it's everything bad about guns. But what about the beneficial things of guns, such as the use of it for hunting? No one ever wants to bring that side up. But when it comes to mycology, everyone looks at, oh, fungus, you can get that in your house, it's bad, it'll cause you to die or something. And I'm like, but what about all the beneficial things we're looking at with it, but you're just going to dismiss it off of some case or something you read in an article?
yeah, yeah, it's true. Like people already have these like preconceived notions of mushrooms or fungus. Like, oh yeah, it'll destroy your house. It's gonna, eat your baseboards, or it's growing out of your bathroom or something. And or not even just the house stuff. Just like people think about mushrooms in one context. It's like, do you like mushrooms? And they're like, on pizza. It's like there's only one little slice of like what people consider to be like the role of mushrooms in their life. And it could be so much more. Like we could be growing materials with mushrooms. There's like startups out there doing that right now, replacing animal products like leather, uh, biofuels, composting, like accelerating waste breakdown so that we can like use green manure, like all the compostable lids and cups and all that stuff. Like if we could design fungus to like eat all of that stuff super fast and just like make our waste streams like super renewable, we wouldn't be dealing with like things that aren't going to break down as quickly, like plastic and some of these more harmful toxic chemicals.
Where do you stand on using with mycology the act of cannabis, or maybe even the act of using I guess mushrooms to trip out? A lot of people always bring in that aspect of mushrooms, how they can kind of be a psychedelic in a way.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. Well, I mean, I think I love all aspects of mycology. Definitely like the psychedelic part found me as well. Um,
You got to explain. You got to have a trip that I got to hear about. Come on.
yeah, totally. Well, my first trip, right? So like my relationship with them has completely changed as I've grown with them and learned how to use them like more appropriately and more beneficially, like for myself and others. Um, but yeah, so uh, I first tried them when I was 18. We like me and my buddies had just like we were smoking weed, just whatever, drinking, just experimenting with like different drugs and of course we wanted to try mushrooms like in that evolution, and so we got a bag and definitely ate way too many like my first time. I think we just split the bag. We didn't even like weigh them or anything, and I ate something like 5 grams, and like we were sitting inside and in the dormitories at CU Boulder, and just like um I don't know if I should even name drop that, but yeah, the tiles of the dormitory were like stacking and falling, and just like I had these thought loops that were like crazy, just like going through like what is life? What does it mean to me? But then like going through it, every 10 seconds, but it felt like 30 minutes, just weird time distortions. I remember at one point I got up and like went to the bathroom, and I told everyone in the room like, oh, you guys got to let me back in because the door's locked behind you for the rooms. And I didn't let anybody know that I was coming back from the bathroom. The door just opened, and it was like everyone knew that we were in the same space and like we could talk without words. It was like really, it was an intense experience, but honestly, like, yeah, it was way too much for a first time.
Well,
And
that what's really weird is when like I've never tried psychedelics, but when you look at the act of psychedelics, like my cousin explained to me a very, very deep story of how he took salvia and then he went to go drink some carrot juice from the fridge and he lived the life of the whole carrot, like from the bird shit flying down into the like dirt, growing the carrot, living the whole life as a carrot. He felt like he was gone for like 3 years and lived this whole carrot life. And then it was only like a couple of seconds from like the drink just hitting his lips, and he explained all that in like very, very deep detail, and I had it on a podcast, so it's a pretty interesting one. But
yeah,
when you hear the act of psychedelics and tripping through the veil or slipping through a layer, and especially using a mushroom to get to that point, it scares people, but I think it does one of the most beneficial things, and it brings, I guess, a new perspective into life. How many times do you talk to someone who's been, who likes tripping, who likes doing psychedelics, or enjoys this experience because it's created a new flavor to life? You know what I mean? I don't want to give drugs a good name when it comes to the aspect of like, oh, you got to do drugs to make life fun. But it does give you a whole new perspective change. I mean, the Native Americans knew that if they would take certain mushrooms or ingest certain things, that they would be able to get high as a group and understand that they can be on the same frequency, much like you in your dormitory, where all your friends are kind of experiencing the same thing and thinking on the same level without using words.
yeah, well, it's interesting. So yeah, we can talk about that. My first experience, definitely, like, I'm not it was a good first experience. It was in that it was positive and it was with people that I was comfortable with, and it was a good set and setting, which is of course very important. Um, but yeah, I completely was like underprepared for emotionally like what it would open me up to, just like psychologically, like what is life when you really consider that question like on different drugs, or under the influence of different things. It's like your thought pattern like breaks, and it's like um it can be put you in a very like vulnerable place mentally for sure.
Well, it's like if you get sick or if you get hit in the head, when you get in that critical state, you have so much care and you just want to feel love. You just want to be taken care of a little bit. You know what I mean? When you trip on something, when you see something, you have a whole new perspective on life. It's like when you have a near death experience, except it's not as bad. It's just more like you are looking around at the world a little bit differently. Like, holy shit, like I remember that table, like how the lines, like I was going through the lines of this wood table and I was falling into them and falling like I was going down a Grand Canyon. You start having these weird like thoughts and these images into your head and these experiences and these feelings. And you start having a more of a realization of what's going on around you. I mean, anybody I've ever met who's tried psychedelics from acid to mushrooms or something, they've always talked about how they have a greater detail and a more examination of the things that are happening in their everyday life now. They're more aware of everything. And I always try and bring in that perspective of trying to understand that because it's something we all truly lack. I feel like in a world now where we're seeing cannabis be used for medical purposes now, and that's starting to get looked at better. Hemp's starting to get looked at better. Things that were so discriminated against just because it was seen as illegal or seen as this is now getting all looked at again. We're living in a society that's promoting growth. And it's like, how far are we away from medicinal mushrooms?
Yeah, hopefully very, very shortly, like they'll be more legal everywhere. But currently, like where I live in Oakland, they have been decriminalized, along with all entheogens. So, peyote cactus and San Pedro and cannabis and like all these other things that fall into entheogen categories. Same in Santa Cruz, California, and Denver, Colorado. So I'm kind of proud that like the two places that I've spent the most of my or the bulk of my life and professional career have been very open to these kinds of things because, well, it makes sense. I'm very into these kinds of things, but
Well, even when you're going out on a trail walk and you're categorizing some of these types of mushrooms too, what do you try and look at that kind of distinguishes what type they are? Do you bring a journal with you, or do you use a lot of the information, you just write it down and then look it up later?
oh yeah, well, it's best to go with people that know what they're doing. So just bring somebody who's educated and has been doing it for a good while and is very familiar with the seasons and the different kinds of mushrooms and their associations with trees and other plants, and just really pick their brain. That's like the best way to learn for sure. But a good guide is nothing to pass up. There's some good ones out there. I definitely recommend one with pictures, but you should not just go by the pictures because it can be deceiving. But yeah, you don't have to look for anything. That's the whole point. It's almost better to just like if you want to be a mycologist or you want to notice like interesting things in the woods, it's almost like slow down and don't look for anything and just wait for something to find you. Like look for the motion, look for like that weird like leaf that's hanging off the tree weird and like catching the breeze because there's a bug attached to it. It's like you got to just find those weird things instead of looking for it, just like let it pop out at you.
Now, even when it comes to the aspect of the first time you've tripped on something, what is your most memorable experience? Would you say that would be your first memorable one, or would you say you have one that stands out in your head above all the others?
Oh, wow. Good question. So my first trip was like definitely a big trip. But it was like kind of a welcoming experience. Like, oh, this is the space. This is what psychedelics are like, this is like the holes that can be like opened up in your original patterns of thinking. Um, but then after that, yeah, it's like it can go so much deeper when you really realize like the therapeutic potential. So after I did that with my friends, I mean, um, of course, I was really intrigued by it, and so I realized that you could order spores like pretty much anywhere in the U.S. And started growing them like on a small scale just for myself and my friends, and eating them in small quantities. And just like every single time, it seemed like the experience just got more and more like introspective. I started to just want to like eat them alone and maybe just do some yoga, like stretch and like really kind of get more in touch with my own mind instead of like I know one time we like ate some mushrooms and then we're doing kind of some like hairy rock scrambling. And I was like, not about that. It was like, I can't be doing that in a different kind of mindset. So it's really not a drug that I think like encourages dangerous behavior. I think it promotes like healing and sitting by yourself and just really thinking about people that you love. And
Would you say that it caused a deeper analysis into your own life? I feel like that would probably be one of the most beneficial things people talk about with psychedelics is that it makes you have a better inflection onto your, I guess, your own insight onto your own life.
yeah, absolutely. It puts you really in touch with your own emotions. You can focus on past events and just really feel it so deeply, but with a new set of tools as like a grown person, right? And sit with that and just like allow those emotions to come up and just like put those somewhere. And just I think it gives the opportunity to heal. And I think that that's what's super beneficial to like people that have actually been through really traumatic things. I'm fortunate that I haven't been through too much. I've experienced some trauma, and I've worked on that with the mushrooms like very successfully, honestly. But war veterans, accident victims, like people that are victims of violent crimes. Like my gosh, like I think that the healing potential of these things is like extraordinary.
Yeah, sometimes I always suggest if you found someone that was really broken or really kind of mentally kind of, I would say crippled or put into a state where maybe they're lost or something, if you, or, maybe they went down a bad road, if you gave them a mushroom and gave them something that truly made them look into their own lives and find things that they had fault with, what kind of deeper form of clarity would they come to? If you just, instead of giving a prisoner or someone who's not, who's on death row or something, maybe just a mushroom trip and see what happens. See if they come to a conclusion that might make them look into their own lives and realize the decisions they made weren't right and realize that, they need to make a change.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like most of the people that I talk to that are into psychedelics, it's kind of more of an altruistic endpoint, like, or path. There's never really an endpoint. I feel like there's always more room for like love and positivity in our lives for sure. Um, but yeah, it seems like most people that eat these psychedelics, it's like they don't want to be violent or focus on evil, negative, you know.
You want to fucking hug everybody, dude. You want to hug
Yeah,
everybody. You want to.
it is a love. It's a serotonin mimic, so or something like that. I'm not like a biochemist by any means, but yeah, so it resembles like molecules of love and happiness, and that makes sense. And
We're gonna call it psychedelics for psychos.
yeah, well, I don't know if we should be doing that necessarily, but
You don't
I
want to give
definitely think that
I
like,
want to give psychopaths. I want to give Charles Manson a psychedelic mushroom and see what happens. I bet he would paint his ass off.
well, maybe, but I'm definitely not an advocate of just like feeding psychedelics to anyone. It needs to be number one informed for sure. Like anybody that's going to go on any kind of mental journey, right, with any kind of compound, like they should be aware and consent.
Oh, I'm not saying slipping into their drink like pull a Bill Cosby or anything. I'm just
Oh yeah,
being
yeah,
like,
yeah, for
hey
sure.
man,
Or forced trials, no forced trials for sure. Like
I
I,
just would be like, hey man, you can choose going to death row, or you can choose to take this psychedelic mushroom and see if you might change your ways on the way you're thinking. And then they'll be like, well, I definitely don't want the electric chair or the lethal injection. I'll take that mushroom. I'm like, okay. Then give it to them on a
oh my
plate,
god.
give them a Capri Sun to wash it down. The next thing you know, bam, let's see what happens.
Well, if that's the whole thing, but I don't think that it needs to even be like that. I think like that's a whole different discussion, like incarceration, like.
That's what I'm saying. Psychedelics for
Yeah, I think,
psychos.
well, it'd be nice if we didn't have to incarcerate people and just like put them in a box with, and like whatever, take taxpayer money to like basically keep them as like an investment vehicle. Like I think that's like super fucked up. We should be like doing the opposite. Definitely like what you're saying, and give them therapy, and if mushrooms are a part of that, like that's awesome. So
Well, it's hard to do too, especially when we talk about incarceration. There's so many problems there. The fact is, we're in a world, in a country that's so overpopulated. I mean, it's nuts. And the amount of cases that judges have to deal with, it's hard to give everybody the proper treatment, the proper thing. I always suggested what would happen is if we just gave judges a certain amount of cases per year, such as you have to deal with 8 cases per year, it lets them thoroughly look at a case, decide what's going on here. Are we looking at both perspectives here? But it's just impossible to do with the amount of judges there are compared to the amount of criminals there are. I mean, a lot of people just break the system just to try and get into incarceration so they can get a free meal, so they can get this. But it's like,
damn, is it real? I've never heard of that.
what, to get a free meal?
Yeah, do people really do that? They go to jail for like,
Homeless people will do the shit out of that. When it gets wintertime, there are no homeless people outside on the street, at least in my town, because what they do is they break the law, they get arrested, they break a store window or something so they can get arrested. Because you know what happens when you get arrested and you don't have any money?
mm,
You get fed a meal.
yeah, that's
they
interesting.
they are required to give you, people go to prison, they'll do this type of stuff because that means they're guaranteed food every day and a place to sleep and protection from the environment.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not accustomed to the mentality. I don't know. That's unfortunate that people have to, resort to like breaking the law in order to like get
Well,
sustenance, right?
even when I'm talking about using mushrooms as a form of clarity, like that can help you unlock so many things about yourself. It can help you find something that you might want to do with your life. You know what I mean? Like you might want
Oh
to
yeah,
find
it
out.
did that for me.
Yeah, like you got into studying mycology. When did that start? Because no kid ever just starts off saying, oh, there's the kids that want to be astronauts, there's the kids that want to be arm wrestlers, there's the kids that want to be boxers, there's the kids that want to be president. You're like, mushrooms, that didn't just happen. When did that change? Did that happen after your first trip?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, well, definitely before my first trip, I just always kind of been fascinated by them and their stigma, and so they just kind of like sat in the background. I always saw them like on hikes or would turn them over and be like, "Oh damn, there's like a big beetle on that," like kind of just like fascinated by them in a weird way. And they just take so many forms too. It's like they can grow on trees, they can grow on the ground, they can grow like up high, like as big conchs, like it's just they can grow slime. It's just like they take so many forms. But yeah, I don't know what like really triggered it. I think a lot of people are would relate that are into mycology. It's just somehow like it just finds you, just like somehow it grabs you. And once you get into it, like any addictive hobby, it's just like you can't stop. It's like all you want to do is hike, and all you want to do is like see more mushrooms and go to mushroom events. And it's really weird how like whole communities exist around really obscure hobbies too. Like at first I thought mycology was a pretty obscure hobby. Turns out no way. Like after I got into obscure hobbies, I realized like, holy shit, there's like a meetup for literally anything. Like people can go like talk about whatever underwater basket weaving like as an actual thing, like people will actually do that. Or just look at whatever like antique car engines between like 65 and 67. It's like, okay, cool, super niche, but like there's a group for everybody. So mycology
There's
is.
things like beer culture, there's things like smoke culture, there's things like
Oh yeah.
cannabis community, there's things, so many things, from glass blowing to woodworking to donut making to food reviewing, to the list goes on and on and on. We're living in a world now where we have the internet at our fingertips, and now we're starting to use it in a beneficial way by bringing back a lot of old school culture too. We're bringing back things from like glassworking. It's been done throughout history to be able to
Oh
use stuff
yeah.
we can do today. I mean, communities are being built upon and built upon, built upon. But like mycology, that's one that's starting to get some popularity to it, because people are starting to look at like so many things around and start to pay attention to more detail. Even though we're really, really into our phones, some people are starting to take a step back and try and enjoy the truest aspects of life by going on a hike and uncovering something.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's good. Like, and they can kind of meet in the middle too. I mean, there's no reason that they can't. Like, one of my best companions, on a hike to bring is my phone, just because it has. I can get like iNaturalist, and if you have reception, you take a picture of like any plant, any flower, and more often than not, it can identify it pretty well. It's pretty accurate. So I definitely recommend iNaturalist for anybody out there that's like really interested in getting more involved in identifying the things around.
Well, how do you usually start upon your growing process? Like, when did you decide that you wanted to start growing your own, and like, what's the steps that you use?
Oh yeah. Okay. So, well, Shroomery is a wealth of information. It's open source, as it should be. I think that these things are really important. If we live in a free society, we should be able to do, you know, have cognitive liberty, grow things for ourselves to stimulate our own minds. Whether that's like rosemary or lavender, like on a very subconscious level. If like you smell lavender, like something happens biochemically, right? Like a lot of people report this. So same with mushrooms, of course, with a lot of education. But yeah, so you can order spores to your house pretty much in any state. I think like the only exclusions are Georgia, California, and Hawaii, and that might be changing soon. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But yeah, from there you can just hop online, go to YouTube. Like there's videos for this pretty much anywhere, and anybody can put the parts together. But basically, you just have to order the spores, have a little sterile space, and be able to take those spores and put those into a sterile culture, or a sterile substrate, and let it grow out. And then from there, it doesn't even need to be sterile anymore. You can just like open up the jars or open up the bags, whatever you're using, and fruit them in a monotub. And anybody can do this. It's very low cost. Like the whole setup could probably be less than $100. I haven't really put pencil to paper on the cheapest way to do this, but
But they don't take a lot of care, do they? Like, you don't have to do a whole lot to them like you have to do with like a tomato plant. Like a lot of like farming plants, you have to stay on top of it, water it all the time. If you miss like a day or watering or something, if something gets messed up. And mushrooms seem like they can just grow out of anything. Like, you can put them in a dark closet, they'll thrive the best.
Yeah, for real. Well, not every mycelium like thrives in a dark closet. I think some of them are stimulated by light, but I'm not totally sure about the science on that. And it definitely happens. Like something happens with light exposure, but like shiitake for sure need exposure to light to fruit. Um, but yeah, anyway, so you're right. It's like very, very low intensity. Anybody can do it. Most of the time, like the initial investment is it. So like you just mix your substrate, put the water in, sterilize it, however you're gonna do it, inoculate it, and then just let it sit, and that's it. That's it. And then eventually you'll have mushrooms if the conditions are right. So all the work is up front.
Out of all your research and all your kind of understanding of this, just with biology and using this type of form of education that you're able to get and doing your own knowledge too, what have you found to be the most interesting you've learned?
Probably, I don't know. That's a really good question. Just because of like how useful fungi are, it's like really hard to like narrow down a single category or a single thing that like is the most interesting. But hopefully breaking down plastic. Like if we could find a fungi that has like better enzymes to break down plastic and all kinds, not just like styrofoam, because like everyone, I think we at this point we have like
That's amazing, though. I just found out about this, that mushrooms are we're using them to help tear down plastic. Like, if we can incorporate that, you know how much trash we could just get rid of
yeah,
without burning it into our, first of all, ecosystem or ozone at all? Like, we could literally tear down so many things. We can incorporate that so we're not getting a sea turtle with a fucking straw up its nose. We're doing,
yeah,
companies can try their hardest to recycle, can try their best to use reusable things, can try to use the best of styrofoam and, stuff that can not affect the environment as much, but you're not going to eliminate it all. But using mushrooms as a form of being able to eliminate another waste product that's not from our environment, that's from us, a man-made waste product.
there's definitely startups out there working on different bits and pieces of this, but yeah, we need to be able to break down the things that we're producing like at a bare minimum or recycle them, or else we're going to be like super fucked in the next like honestly like 50 years. I mean if that, things are just like piling up at an alarming rate. I don't Where do you live exactly?
Ocean City, Maryland.
Ocean City, Maryland. Okay, yeah, I'm never been to Maryland. Oh wait, actually, yeah, I've been to DC once. I guess that counts, right? Is that still Maryland, or it's its
It's about a
own
couple hours
province?
away, but when you look at, like, for me in my town, we're nothing. We have the ocean on one side and the bay on the other. We really are a beach town, so we really try and care about the beach look. We try and make sure that, we're popular during the summer. It's a tourist attraction. Everybody wants to come to the beach. Everybody wants to go to the bar. But our town tried so many of effective ways to try and help with the global climate, or first of all, global change around here by, people installing solar panels on their house for a better form of energy, people creating signs and things that say no smoking on the beach, leave only your footprints so you're not leaving trash, because it's so easy when you're smoking a cigarette just to be able to toss that butt on the ground and not worry about it.
Yeah, it's like the whole thing is a mentality for sure.
When we look at, first of all, you with mycology, you're doing something that a lot of people are not really looking at, even though there might be a small niche group for it. But a lot of people aren't aware of the benefits of mushrooms. Are you trying to turn this into an organization or a community, or maybe even a sustainable company that can be able to benefit by using the production of mushrooms, or just the understanding of it in general? I mean, if we can incorporate something that tears down plastic, that would change so many environmental things. That would change a lot of what's going on with the world. I mean, if you could incorporate that, maybe using mushrooms in a more healthy way, such as we use them in herbs and supplements to be able to give a sustainable bacteria or type of eliminating an infection in somebody's body, like, what do you plan on doing with this?
Um, there's a lot of things to do, but yeah, I think as of right now, I am very interested in somehow making a space that could be similar to like an artist space or some kind of workspace, shared workspace, just for working with fungus. So there are a couple places in the Bay Area to work with science, like open source science. So there's countercultural labs and biocurious, um, both of which are very cool. But it's not exactly what I have in mind, so I think it would be cool to have, like, a open source garden center where anybody can come in and learn how to grow plants, but start with mycology, kinda, like, prove it out through that, and set up the lab and just have people like come in and work on whatever they want to work on. If they want to grow shiitakes in their kitchen, like let's do it. If they want to grow, something more complex in their garden to like feed their tomato plants alongside, like something more intense, like break down their compost more efficiently. Like let's start a project and like really set up piles and do it scientifically. Like I'm happy to sponsor that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm totally into like making an organization. And there are organizations out in the Bay Area already. There's like Bay Area Applied Mycology, Bay Area Mycological Society. There's man, so many more. Um, just groups of people that are really interested in mycology, but there's seems to be that there needs to be like a working group, and there's like a bare minimum supplies that you need to be able to do this efficiently. So there needs to be like a critical mass of people that want to work like weekly to really make any of these endeavors like worthwhile. And yeah, finding a space is like the biggest thing for me right now. So that's on my mind.
I definitely think the hardest thing for just the idea of mycology in general is the fact is the stigma behind it is a little bit too much. Like people always associate it with a stoner type mentality. People always associate fungus with being bad, fungus being this, fungus. I mean, every time you look at a cartoon, every time you look at a TV show, it has something to do with a mushroom. People talk about like, oh, it's athlete's foot, it's a fungus. It's like, what the fuck are we doing? Why do mushrooms get such a bad rep like that? Is it just because of what they look like? Like they're not very appealing.
Well, yeah, I think the same can be true for all microbes, really. Like so underappreciated. I mean, we only talk about bacteria if it's like oh, I have an infection, it's like, but we don't give credit to like all of our great microbiome that's like breaking down our food every time we eat, or making air for us to breathe, like algae. And I think microbes we really owe a lot to. But you're right, they're like super stigmatized, and fungus especially, just because like it's gross, like people are unaccustomed to it. It's wet. It's like can eat things that shouldn't be eaten, it can eat like things that are lacquered and like should otherwise be stable. It can eat like things that are fixed and tanned, and it's just kind of grosses people out that they can't control it either. It's not like a spider, at least you can kill it, like get it out of your house, you know where it is. But like fungus, it's like creeping along just like in the background.
Yeah, it's like if it wasn't so important, then why would we have a whole kingdom established on it?
That's so true. Yeah, it has its own kingdom, and we're more related to fungus than we are plants. So
Especially the stigma behind it. You want to talk about something that grows when it shouldn't be growing there and keeps on spreading and won't stop and it's hard to get rid of. That's the human race for a fact.
yeah, for sure. And what's really interesting too is like fungus. We owe all of our soil building up until now to fungus and bacteria, and plants, of course, like doing some work in there. But um, yeah, most of it's been done by microbes. So I don't know. I kind of even lost track of my train of thought there. But
Well, it throws it in the same category that we like to associate with all things that go that look not appealing to the eyes, such as insects. Insectology is starting to get a little bit looked at more because now people are noticing, holy shit, worms are actually beneficial to our soil. It's like, oh, really? Really? You just don't like it because it doesn't have any eyes. And if you take a pencil, you can split it in two.
yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think there is this revival of like people that are interested in, like you said before earlier, is like really eclectic hobbies, like people that are really into gardening and keeping plants now. And yeah, getting into hobbies like setting up a moth light and checking out the moths like on their balcony at night. And I've seen more people that are just otherwise like I didn't think we're into that stuff. I thought they just wanted to like go out and go to a movie and kind of just ignore the natural world. I think there is a revival in these hobbies, and it's good to see.
What I think is it's what's happening is with social media and technology really taking off, it is giving people a better perspective to kind of use more things and come across something that they might not have learned about, such as mycology. But also the same factor is we're burning out pretty fast with technology. It's
Hmm.
coming at faster and faster rates. Our attention span's really starting to kind of get hyped up a little bit. So now we're not really able to focus for very long. And then eventually it's going to get to the point that's like, when's the next new iPhone coming out? It's like, we just released one yesterday. Well, I want another one. And then eventually you just get bored and start going off and doing your own thing and really trying to find your roots again. And that's where we can fall into farming. That's where we can fall into a more of a sustainable hobby that's more beneficial to the human mind as a form of therapy. I mean, gardening, one of the best forms of therapy.
Oh my God, yeah, for sure. And I definitely think that that's something that more people should find or attempt to find, right? Like our hobbies don't have to be these destructive things that
Well, shit, if you're gardening, you get angry, you yell at the plants, they grow bigger.
maybe, you
Well,
know,
the carbon dioxide from our voices, apparently.
oh, true that. Yeah, I guess I didn't think about it like nutrient cycle wise. Sorry, I'm moving away from the mic again. I didn't realize that. Yeah, you're right. I think that people can find these like therapeutic hobbies, and that would be like most beneficial. Really, like there's so much to do out, for the human race to like recover the harm that we've done to our environment. That like if people could pick up a gardening hobby or a mycology hobby or just an indoor plant hobby, anything's worthwhile. So
Do you ever
definitely
think it'll
encourage
get?
people to do that.
Do you ever think it'll get to a point in our country where we're using mushrooms as fuel?
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, really, I know this has been considered, right? Like lakes are a huge source of energy storage, just because then we can like move the lake, like bleed the lake through a dam, spin a turbine, generate energy. The same can be done for mycelium somehow. Like mycelium can be used as a battery somehow, whether it's carbon or nitrogen or
Well, that's a good point that you bring up because I know there's a certain type of mushroom that grows underwater that creates a light source. It creates an illumination type look to it. So you're able to actually see, like if someone throws a flashlight underwater, that little light that beams up at the bottom, like you throw a glow stick under there. There's a mushroom that has that illumination type glow to it that helps you see underwater. I know some people that go into caverns underwater and they'll have those mushrooms in there, and it's a natural source. It's really strange to think that we cannot be able to manipulate that or be able to use that as a sustainable form of energy.
yeah, totally. Wow, it's really interesting you bring that up. Yeah, there's tons of bioluminescent things out there, like algae and bacteria and mushrooms definitely are a part of that. I've never heard of the underwater glowing mushroom. I'll have to look into that. But yeah, there's like a number of mushrooms that they grow like or they glow very mildly though. So like a lot of people see these incredible like long exposure photography pictures of these mushrooms like glowing in the woods, and they do glow like really mildly, but they only look like that intense because of the photography. So
Would you say that Instagram does a good job at kind of highlighting mycology a little bit, or does it a bit of a disservice with the fact that you can edit it so much to make it look something that's completely different from what it naturally is?
yeah, well, I think it's really cool to like be able to highlight like the natural abilities of these really cool, interesting organisms. But there is something to be said for that too. It's like Instagram can be really beneficial for exposure, like get people to like see these things and appreciate them and like want to like be a steward for their survival more, and take care of the environment. And like it can be like really important to like connect these ideas to people with technology. But then again, like yeah, people see like a really cool mushroom or a really cool plant, and then they want to go find it out in nature, and like maybe that alone like inspires some like environmental destruction at some point. Like I know there's some criticism definitely drawn because of like some influencers that were on the California hills, like trampling a bunch of wildflowers. And on Instagram, like the pictures look really cool when you're like laying in these wildflower beds, but of course it's like destroying the next season's seeds. Those flowers aren't going to survive to produce seeds. So it is really important to have that discussion if like Instagram is really helping or hurting in a certain natural way.
If you had to predict, I guess, what would happen with mushrooms in the next 100 years if people decided to give it more, like if more people, such as me, found this mycology, found other things, like everyone started looking at it differently, especially with social media, and started seeing a turnaround with mushroom culture, where would you depict we would be with our technology, with our resources, with our earth in the next 100 years?
Oh man, yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I'd like us to see it, or like to see us completely close the loop if we could make all of our materials that we use. Well, depending on the needed lifetime of the material, which is something to consider. I think everything should have like a why do we need houses to last for 300 years? Like we can replace them bit by bit, but like it brings to mind like that old thing that's like if you have a ship, right, and you like replace like all of the parts on the ship, is it still the original ship?
Yeah, well, imagine if we're able to manipulate the certain character or traits of a mushroom to be able to grow it like a pesticide. So the whole thing is, instead of spraying harshful chemicals onto our produce, on all our crops and the things that we consume that we're not paying attention to, we're able to manipulate so they won't attack the plants, but attack the very bad chemicals and bacteria, or maybe give off mushrooms are known to give off a certain scent. I mean, aren't truffles mushrooms?
Oh yeah, absolutely,
Yeah, fucking pigs
very
can smell
strong.
those things out of anything. So if we're able to manipulate, maybe get a mushroom to produce a certain chemical or aroma that can give off, that can distract or eliminate bugs from getting near it or even keeping them away, we can save our crops. So we won't have to spray harmful pesticides to keep the bugs off.
Hmm. Yeah, well, what's interesting actually is a lot of pesticides come from fungus. So we've seen that, this certain kind of fungus, when growing on this plant, the bug eats it and it dies. Like that's how BT is. Of course, that's a bacteria, but yeah, that was like the first agricultural bacteria that was used as a agricultural pesticide, Bacillus thuringiensis. Um, but it has an insecticide that or it's a protein really that crystallizes in the insect's gut and splits its midgut so it can't eat anymore. It kills it eventually. Um, and this is how like pesticides are all developed. So most of them are developed as kills. It needs to have a mode of action. Um, and that mode of action needs to be noted like metabolically. So when they're being developed, like we're looking at different bacteria and fungus, and then we find that we target that single molecule in that bacteria or fungus that does that to that insect, and we map out the metabolic like impact that that chemical has on the insect, and hopefully define it so that it's like only active in just butterflies or just worms or just certain things that are like eating the target crop. And that's how pesticides are developed. So I don't know. I don't think it's really like necessarily using uh, more selective molecules from fungus. We need to just return to like treating our soil right and having a better relationship with our carbon and nitrogen inputs so that we don't need so there's no like pest imbalances, and then we don't need pesticides at all to begin with. Like that's what we need. So you're right. Like we need to use fungus, but it needs to be in like in a very thoughtful way so that we can make our ecology balanced when we're producing our food.
Well, sadly, to
And
save
that's a
the
really long-winded explanation. I'm sorry. We need to like cut these more short. I should ask you more questions.
it's all good. Well, when it comes to the factor of to care about our Earth, it's going to get to a point where it's like the Simpsons movie, where she's like, "We don't want the levels to get to this high, and we're here." Oh, that's not so
Yeah.
bad. And then she's like, "No, I meant we're here." And then next thing you know, like Homer Simpson drops a silo into the lake, and everything's done. They have to block up the whole city. Then everyone started caring about their town and trying to create a more sustainable Earth. Only to the point when we're in critical level or we're past the point of no return is when people are going to start caring. We're just trying to highlight the fact of we need to start paying attention now, making the steps now, so we don't have to get to that state where there is no reverse.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is like everyone, and not to like, repeat the last like 30 years of environmental activism, but like everyone needs to do their part. But it's so true, and it needs to come from, instead of just the individual considering that, it needs to be our entire culture. Like businesses need to think more sustainably, instead of like just putting pen to paper and being like, oh well, if we recycle, it costs us an extra $50 a month to have them come pick that up. Like that's an expense. So we'll just put it all in the landfill. Like I understand that there's like, we need to incentivize like this mentality that will encourage us to like take better care of our environment because it's really all we have. Like we bleed the environment dry, we're so fucked. Like it's not even like a hippie or like stoner or anything mentality. It's just like if we fuck up our environment that we need to survive, like this is our spaceship. Like what the fuck are we doing if
You
like
don't
people are like
shit where you eat.
toxifying? Yeah,
You don't,
exactly.
unless you live in a house where there's a toilet in the kitchen, which I have seen, but you don't shit where you eat.
Yeah, and it really, I mean, maybe it's just my perspective, right? But like there's climate change deniers out there, like people deny anything, like there's flat earthers out there or whatever, but like you drive across the US, there's fucking plastic like on the side of the road no matter where you're at. Like it's so visible, like the harm that we're having on our environment. Like at this point, I just don't understand how people can like tuck that away and
Well,
like
coming from the
be
perspective
okay
of the
with that,
people
you
that
know?
coming from the perspective of people that toss out trash out their window, you don't want your car dirty, but you're
Oh
more
my
than happy
God,
that it's
yeah.
dirty your home. That makes sense, right?
Yeah, that's insane. Like I I don't know, it's just completely a different mentality for sure.
And it's not that hard just to keep a plastic bag in your car like I do. I have it on my passenger floor. I get done with a drink, I get done with something, I need to throw it out. I don't throw it out the window, I throw it in the bag.
Oh my God, yeah, good on you. Like thank you for doing that. I hope more people do that. But yeah, it's just that lazy mentality. It's everything. It's our entire culture. It's like the whole takeout mentality. Like the cup has to be plastic because it's the easiest thing for the business to produce, to put that product in that cup for the consumer to take it away. You know, it's like everything from the ground up needs to be changed to where it's like more renewable and more sustainable for the inputs that are going into it, whether it's the materials, but also for the people that are producing this stuff. Because like, man, like most of our plastic and all the other bullshit that like we're buying on Amazon, it comes from like these countries that are the inputs are being mined by people that aren't paid like living wages, and you know the same thing. So like we really need to heal ourselves as we heal our environment is really how I see it.
If I was going to be president, I'd probably throw more money into manipulating bacteria and trying to find a way to be able to eliminate, I guess, harmful production of waste in our environment, such as like oil that gets leaked into our ocean and all these other factors that come into hand. We need to find a way to be able to create a form of bacteria that can kind of eliminate that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We could use so much more sustainable things to do with bacteria, such as eliminating harmful waste products into our environment, such as like, if you're able to manipulate bacteria to eliminate oils in our water, such as using algae in a more, I guess, maybe warp a couple of traits. I mean, do we really need an iPhone 20, or can we worry about the production of Earths and where it's going at this point?
You know, there's biotechs out there that are working on creating fungal strains or bacteria strains or whatever it is that it will consume these things that are like plaguing our environment. So hopefully more of those can pop up and be funded and be successful and get more backing, and just like culturally we'll be more acceptive of that mentality of like needing to design things with a life cycle, you know.
So, Jake, I really appreciate you coming out and doing the podcast. I kind of want to give you here a minute at the end if you want to promote your Instagram page, if you want to promote any sites or anything or community organizations that happen to do with mycology, if you're interested.
Yeah, for sure. So my personal Instagram, it's just what I do the most, my most popular social media, I guess. And it's just at fun guy of the world. Fun guy, like somebody who has fun, not fungi, like the whole
It's a
kingdom
play
that we
on
just
words,
talked about.
people. It's a play on
Exactly,
words.
exactly. Uh, and other than that, there's the movement to decriminalize psychedelic mushrooms and other entheogens across the U.S., and it's being led by MAPS. And decriminalize nature is one to mention as well. I'm sure there's a bunch of others, but I just encourage people to like get out and look at psychedelics and their relationship to how they can, or you know, psychedelics, but all aspects of fungus and other microbes, and how they can really change their relationship with you know, how they're living their everyday life, like for to trade in like consumer ideals for more renewable consumer ideals, just like at a surface level. So I don't know. That's what I encourage.
Well, thanks so much for listening to this episode Out of the Blank podcast, and stay tuned for our next episode.